Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about how to get hired as a graphic designer. The first thing you need to do is listen to your dad, go back to school and retrain as an accountant. Okay, seriously, but before you do that, I'm going to share some advice with you, and I can guarantee that if you apply all of these things correctly, you'll have no problem finding a job. I've been on both sides of the hiring process, and it's not until I started interviewing and hiring designers myself that some of these things started to click for me. And after reviewing hundreds of applications, I've been able to summarize most of the common mistakes that designers are making. In this video, I'll be talking about everything it takes to get hired as a graphic designer. From your portfolio and CV, to emails and interviews, and throwing in an extra tip at the end that'll help set you apart from other candidates. So let's jump in. The first thing to consider is what kind of company do you want to work at? The first distinction is working in-house when you're working for one single company, or working at an agency, where you're working with different clients that agency has. In my personal opinion, you learn more at an agency and it's more fun because you're going to be working with lots of different clients, different projects, compared to just working on the same one all the time. The trade-off is that sometimes you work longer hours or they pay less, but it's definitely worth it if you're going to learn more, especially if you're just getting started. That's just my opinion. More importantly than this, you need to ask yourself, what area of design do you want to work at? Because you can't just be scattered and all over the place. You need to at least have some focus of what areas you want to dedicate yourself to. So do you want to work in branding, UX, at a marketing agency? Do you want to work in print and packaging? Do you want to do motion design? So all of these things require different skill sets. So you should at least kind of have some focus of what direction you want to go in. And this brings us to your portfolio. Your portfolio is the most important thing in your job application by far. This is where you get to show your work, your skills, the projects you've worked on. So it doesn't matter how much experience you have, who you've worked with. If people see your work and they don't like it, then they're not going to hire you. It's that simple. And it also works the opposite. Like if you've got amazing work, then they might overlook some other things. The next question would be what to include in your portfolio. Well, there's no definitive answer, and actually you can have different portfolios. So that's the thing, if you're kind of not sure and you like working in branding, but you also like marketing, you can have like two different versions of your portfolio, one focused on identity design, and the other one where you throw in some social media posts or web design, and you can just use each one of those for different types of companies. But it's important to not be all over the place, because it's very typical when you see people straight out of school that they'll have just a bunch of different things. They'll have one example of motion design, some concept art, something in 3D, and some identity design. And this is just pretty confusing for an employer because they don't really know how you're going to use those skills effectively. So one thing you can do if you've got a bunch of different skills is try and make those skills as contextually relevant as possible. So if you're gonna try and get a job in a branding agency, or you like working on identity design, but you've also got some skills in 3D, then instead of just showing an image of some rendering you've done, you can apply those 3D skills to some identity design. So you can create some shapes and put those as part of some identity that you create. And that way you're showing off your 3D skills, but you're making it relevant to branding. So that means it'll be much more valuable for an employer that's looking to hire someone for that particular field. And with your projects, the golden rule here is if in doubt, leave it out. So you should only have the best of your work in your portfolio. If there's 4 pieces that are good and 1 that's bad, then whoever's reviewing that is just going to focus on the bad one, and they're going to expect that kind of work from you. So it's better to have a few good projects than a lot of mediocre ones. As for how many, for me I'd say that 3 or less is kind of a bit too little, and above 6 it's a bit too much and it starts to get overwhelming. So like between 4 and 6 is probably the sweet spot. No one cares if the project is real or not. So yeah, it's better if you've done it for a real client, but it doesn't really matter. Like if the project's good and the design is good, then no one's really gonna ask if it's done for a real client or if you just made it up. And if they do, you can just tell them. Like, it's better to show work that you're really proud of, even if there's not a real client behind it, that shows some client work that maybe you didn't have too much creative freedom on it and you're not so happy with the result. Because at the end of the day, what an employer is going to see is the final design. And just saying that, oh, the client didn't give me much freedom on this, so that's why it looks ugly, that's not going to fly. So just show work that you're proud of. And you should definitely write a bit of a case study for each project. So write an explanation, like the goals of the project, who the client is, even if it's just made up. And yeah, then a bit about your process or how you got to that solution. Because if you're looking at a logo, for example, and you just slap it on a page, You can't really know if that's a good and effective solution if you don't know what problem it's trying to solve. So you need some information about the client and the brief to actually be able to evaluate that solution and know if it's effective. Also, please make it as easy as possible. So no zips, no download links, no WeTransfers. The only thing you should have is a compressed PDF, like just of your portfolio attached to your email, or a link to your website or social media profiles, or whatever your online portfolio is. And that's it. No one wants to be downloading gigabytes of files and stuff on your computer when you're reviewing job applications. So please keep it simple. Another question you might ask yourself is, do you need a degree? Well, it kind of depends, because you definitely don't need a degree, but it can help in some situations. Some companies will require it. And this isn't because they just need your degree per se, it's just because they've got a ton of applications and it's a way of filtering. So if you've already got more candidates that you know what to do with, then you're going to try and filter them in as many ways possible. And one of these ways is just requiring a degree. But even then, your portfolio and your work beats absolutely everything. If you've got a person with a degree and with a kind of normal portfolio, and then another person that's self-taught but has an amazing portfolio and some really cool work, then almost everyone's going to go with the second person, because at the end of the day, it's more important the work that you can actually produce than where you've studied. And what I would say, even if you don't have a degree or you're self-taught, you can still apply for positions that require these things. And that works for other requirements as well. So obviously you don't want to apply for a job if you don't meet any of the requirements. But a lot of these times, these job offers, they're written by HR departments and they'll just throw stuff in there. But just because you don't meet some of the requirements doesn't mean that maybe you can't make up for it some other way if your portfolio is really good or if your work's amazing. So it's definitely worth just applying anyway, even if you don't meet some of the criteria. Next is your CV. So if I had to say one thing about CVs, it's don't overcomplicate it, but make it perfect. As graphic designers, we sometimes want to make things as flashy and cool as possible. This really isn't necessary on your CV, but you do need to make it as clean and perfect as possible. Like, come on, you're a designer. Like, there shouldn't be like weird word breaks or misaligned text or that kind of thing. Just make it nice, make it easy to read, and make it as clean as possible. Also, please take good photos. Like, this should go without saying, but you need to have a decent photo of yourself. Like, you can't imagine how many CVs I've seen with just the most terrible photos, just kind of like selfies or horrible backgrounds or creepy shadows making you look like a serial killer. Like, come on, you're a designer. You're supposed to have at least some sense of aesthetics. So just take a decent photo of yourself where you're smiling, you look like a nice person, and I actually feel like having a conversation with you, ideally. And when it comes to the experience section of your CV, so what to include or what not to include. Well, here it depends, because some people say that you shouldn't include anything that's not completely relevant to the job. So if you're going to work as a designer, you should leave out everything that's not design related. Well, I don't agree with this. Like, if this is the first job you're applying for, it's good for you to include some work you've done. Like, even if you've worked in McDonald's during the summer, like maybe that can tell me that you can work with people, that someone's actually hired you, so you're probably not a completely weird person and you've got some decent social skills, like that kind of thing. So that's fine. When you should probably leave it out is when it doesn't fit your personal story very well. A guy in uni working at McDonald's and then looking for an internship in graphic design makes perfect sense. What doesn't make sense is someone that's finished their degree, they've worked at an agency for 2 years, and then they've worked in McDonald's for a year, and now they're looking for a job again. So that's why, okay, why did you go from designer to the McDonald's? That, there it kind of makes less sense, so I'd probably just leave it out. And what you shouldn't probably not include is things that are kind of distracting from your design career. So if you've had like a previous career in some other field, or you're also studying something else that's totally unrelated, then you don't really need to put that in, because I might just think that you're not completely focused on design and that you might just go and do the other thing at some point. So it's best to keep it focused to one discipline. And another thing that you can add, especially at the start if you've got no experience, is courses and things that you've done on your own. So even if you've done just some online video or whatever, courses in something related to design, you can just stick all of that in there. And it's good because that shows that you've got initiative, that you learn things on your own, and that you're willing to keep improving. So that's definitely a good thing, and it can help like fill up your CV a little bit if it's looking a little bit empty. And spelling, please. I shouldn't even have to say this, but you don't know the amount of spelling errors or grammar mistakes I've seen in CVs and portfolios. It's like, Jesus, like if this is your first impression that you're applying to a job for and it's got spelling errors, then how am I going to trust you with a client project, okay? So just please double check everything. No spelling errors, no broken links, all these kind of things. Just check them thoroughly, because if not, you just come off as unprofessional and not trustworthy. And as well as your CV, some people include letters. You can have like your introduction letters towards this company, or recommendation letters that someone else has written for you, recommending you. I don't think this is really necessary, unless maybe it's some really high level thing and you've got someone important that's recommending you. Then just don't bother, because people don't really have the time to read it and it doesn't really add much value in my opinion. But what does add value is knowing how to write a decent email. So there's a few things to consider here. The first one is follow the damn instructions. Like if on the website that you're seeing the job application on, it says that you should write job application _ your name in the subject of the email, then just write that. Don't come up with something clever or something different. Just follow the damn instructions. It's not that difficult. Also, get a respectable email address. Ideally it would be your domain name, but it doesn't have to. Just something that sounds normal and professional, like your name /design or whatever @gmail.com. But please don't use the same Hotmail account you've been using since you were 12. This should also be pretty obvious, but don't just copy and paste the name of the company into your Gmail, because sometimes you'll copy the format of the text and it'll be obvious that you've just pasted the name in there. So that's really funny when you just see someone and the name of the company is just like in a different font or a different size. You can just tell that they've just copied and pasted it, so they're just probably sending this email out to a ton of companies without really doing anything personalized. You don't need to make it super personal, but it does help to write something to that company just to show that you're interested. And just don't say anything weird. Like, people sometimes get too crazy with emails, but I'm going to show you the basic structure of what your email can look like. Hello, person that is hiring. I saw on your website that you're looking for a whatever. I love the work you've done for this client, and I think I would be a great fit for your company because of this. You can find my portfolio and CV attached in this email, and check out some more of my work on my website. If you have any questions or need more information, you can contact me at phone number and email. Thank you for your time, and I hope to hear back from you soon. Best regards, your name. So that's it, just keep it simple. You don't really need anything too crazy. If you've got a good portfolio and you follow these steps, you'll probably land yourself a few interviews. So, important things on an interview. Well, this should also go without saying, but don't be late, dress well, even if it's on Zoom, like at least get some decent lighting so you don't look like some kind of serial killer in a basement. So just, look after your image a little bit. If you get really nervous before an interview, there's obviously things you can do, like, go for a run or meditate or whatever to try and get into a decent state. But also think that if you've landed the interview, it's because your work's good enough. They've seen your portfolio, they've seen your work, and if you're there, it's because your work is good enough. So don't overstress it, don't overcomplicate things. If you're there, you're good enough. But you should definitely rehearse or have certain answers for certain questions that you've practiced before the interview. It's pretty normal that they'll ask you okay, tell me about yourself or tell me your story. So here you should have put together a decent story that kind of highlights the best parts of you. And then for the typical HR questions. So I love these. Some of these get really ridiculous. There's different categories of them. There's the make sense questions, which are, what do you like about our company? Why do you want to work here? Or where do you see yourself in, say, 5 years? These questions, you should also have answers for them, but they kind of at least make sense on a get to know you more level. Next is the intermediate questions, which also make kind of sense, but they're kind of cringy. Like the tell me 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses about yourself. So yeah, those start to get a bit weird. And then there's the HR having too much free time kind of questions. Like someone literally told me the other day that they'd been asked in an interview, if you were an inanimate object, what object would you be? Like that kind of shit. And I'm not kidding you, I was at this interview once and this guy asked me if I would consider going to salsa classes with him. And my leg was broken at this time and I was in crutches, so that was pretty interesting. And also just think that it's okay to not know everything, especially if you're just starting out. It's better to admit that you don't know something but you'd love to learn it than trying to make something up on the spot. And once you're done with the interview, it's also good to follow up with an email. So this makes you look more professional, it means that you're interested, and it keeps you top of mind, You can address the person that interviewed directly, thanking them for the opportunity, or mentioning something that you've said during the interview. And one important thing is to not take things personally. Because the first time I was looking for an internship, I sent out like maybe 5 emails and only one of them replied. And I remember I was like thinking, why aren't these people replying to me? Like, what's the problem here? But of course, afterwards, seeing it from the employer's perspective, it's like you'll literally get a new email every like 10 minutes. It's impossible to answer everyone unless you're some kind of huge company. So, you know, even if you send out like 50 emails and no one answers, just don't take it personally. But then there's the other side, like if you send out 500 emails and no one replies at all, then maybe it's time to review your work, like ask for feedback, and don't just keep spamming companies, because I'll have people that sends like the same CV like 3 times in a row and just with the same work and the same everything. So if you're not getting answers from anyone, just look for someone that can give you some honest feedback and keep working on your portfolio. And another cool thing that no one's doing right now that can help set you apart is adding a Loom video to your email. If you haven't heard of Loom, it's this software that works with a Chrome plugin, and it lets you record your screen and make little video presentations for different things that you can just share as a link. It's been really useful for me when communicating for clients, like you can just send them a wee 5-minute video instead of having to set up a meeting. And it would be the same if you're applying for a job. If you can make a wee 5-minute video, like just introducing yourself and saying why you like the company, then it'll make that email much more personal and it'll definitely set you apart from other candidates. So that's all for the moment. Let me know if you've got more questions, I'll try and answer them in the comments. And yeah, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want to see more, and see you in the next one. Bye.